Hi, everyone, and welcome to the new era with NEXERA. My name is Cheryl Weedmark with Into Communications, and we have Wes McCarter, president of NEXERA, joining me today. Our topic is around something called parts inventory management. We are going to educate you, the audience, on the need for better service data in order to manage inventory levels properly to avoid either overstocking and then, of course, the expense that comes along with that. Welcome again, Wes.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Why do dealers need to rethink their inventory management in the future in order to support their service techs?
I think the key is what we don't, some of it we know or don't know what we don't know, which is how is this virus and how is the impact of this virus going to change print? Some of that we don't know. But what we do know is that dealers by and large have really serious issues with inventory management. And we see that in the form of not only obsolescence, but we see it in how much value is moving from being active to obsolescence. And that's cash that the dealers really should not be spending on inventory. They can get the parts readily from the manufacturer. So having excess quantities on the shelf is simply tying up needed funds that could be used elsewhere in the business.
So then how would effective inventory management translate to positive outcomes that a business might want? So we're talking about things like great customer experience, as an example, profitability, cash flow.
The two challenges that every dealer faces is first, making sure the technician has the part that they need to resolve the customer's problem as quick as possible. So labor is often mandated or dictated to by the amount of those service calls that they have to do. So if we can put the right part in the right place at the right time, we can reduce that number to a reasonable amount. You never eliminate it. It's impossible for the technician to carry everything they could possibly ever imagine using, or they'd be driving semi-trucks. So we've got to have a reasonable expectation of how that's going to work. So we need to get those parts. Well, we can't get them to the tech unless we have them in the warehouse. And we can't get them in the warehouse unless we can get them from the manufacturer. Where the breakdown happens is that we're not paying attention to that timeline. How fast can we shorten that timeline? If I can get it from the manufacturer in 2 weeks, am I forecasting out so that I have that part in my office or my warehouse at that time that I need it so that I can then turn around and provide it to the technician?
So then how would a dealer gauge effectiveness of their inventory process?
Most dealers currently use what's called inventory turn, where they look at the dollar value they use every month relative to the dollar value of the parts they purchase. There's other ways to doing that. We tend to look at aging, and we look at it differently than the rest of the industry because aging is a function of how often we use the part. What we look at is not only how often do we use the part, but do we have equipment in the field that can actually use it? So the goal there is to identify what parts are eventually going to end up obsolete because the equipment we have in the field is going away. So as machines are cycled out through sales and they're putting in new equipment, replacing older equipment, are we in turn reducing this inventory need so that by the time all that equipment's gone, we've depleted our inventory to zero? Currently, that doesn't happen.
It seems like it would be as simple as having the salespeople that are, selling the products communicate with the inventory people. But why does that collaboration not typically happen within organizations?
Well, one, they're semi-siloed. And sales' goals is to get out there and sell equipment, and services goal is to service that equipment. The inventory person is there trying to fulfill those needs, right? So the inventory person is often responsible for bringing the equipment in and making sure the salespeople have the equipment to sell, and then also doing the parts. But there's not really a solid connection for them to go, how do I forecast out my parts needs if my base of equipment that can use that part is declining? And then it's complicated by the fact that sometimes there are multiple models that use that particular part. And it could even be an older model replaced by a new model, but it can still use the same part. So it's a very complicated component for the average parts manager to have to deal with. And there just isn't a solid tool that really helps them get that done.
The reason that we're having this conversation is obviously so that dealers and businesses can take that proactive approach to managing their inventory. But let's just take today's situation, and potentially you've got a dealer that's being reactive. What do they do with current inventory, especially when their concern right now is probably more on the cash flow side? What do they do with their inventory that has no value?
Well, the first is we have an opportunity to make an offer and purchase some of that inventory as long as we have other places that could use it. So first thing is to analyze the inventory, find out what's obsolete, get rid of what's obsolete where you can. Then analyze what we call it min-max. What are your reorder thresholds? And look at the inventory that you've got in excess of 90 days worth of usage and start adjusting those min-maxes so that you stop reordering them automatically. Most dealers get into this problem because they have their ERP set to auto reorder when my inventory quantity gets to a minimum. Well, that minimum could be set at 1, but the maximum was 5. So the system says, oh, when I get to 1, reorder 4. Well, what if I only have 1 machine in the field left that can use that part and it auto reorders 4? I'll never use the 4. So I end up with that obsolescence. So use this time that we have now to systematically go through your inventory and make those adjustments and reallocate the resources to get rid of that obsolete inventory so that you can have more of what you actually need.
That's a good point. So if you had to make one other suggestion when it comes to managing inventory right now for either dealers or service leaders or operation managers, what would that be?
Well, obviously, we would encourage them to send their data because we can do the analytics much quicker for them than they can do for themselves, and we can apply a different set of rules that's separate of the ERP. So if the ERP could be set one way, but we can analyze it neutral and objectively to give them the right information that they need, but also invest in training for the parts people. Logistics is a very complicated, very fluid management team. And I think that most of the parts people aren't adequately trained to deal with that complication. And we see that in the data all the time.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Well, thank you so much, Wes.
Thank you, Cheryl. Enjoyed it.
For more information, everybody, don't forget to visit the NEXERA website, and we will see you next week on the New Era with NEXERA. See you then.